Hello everybody, and welcome to the presentation of the study conducted by myself, Iliana Moraitaki, and my colleague, Dr. Tora Tenbrink. The title of our study was called Just Following Directions, the Effects of Gender on Direction Giving. Now, the idea behind our study was that direction giving involves diverse cognitive processes, such as creating a mental map, following the desired route, and choosing the correct terminology to provide directions efficiently. Now, many perceived differences have been speculated in the speech of men and women, yet research on spontaneous direction-giving differences based on gender is limited, and it may be indicative of differences in cognitive processes. Previous research on spontaneous direction-giving gender differences has shown mixed results, so we wanted to add to the body of literature so that more definite conclusions can be drawn in the future. In terms of previous research, women have shown an increased recollection of landmarks when direction giving, especially buildings. That has led women to use buildings as landmarks and reference points in route directions more frequently than men. Men have been shown to use cardinal directions more than women, but that is not to say that women cannot do so. Research has shown that women may prefer not to use cardinal directions, but they can do so if asked. Women have also been found to be more likely to use an increased number of left and right markers, although not all studies confirm that. Men have also been found to have an increased use of locating hidden targets, pointing to out-of-sight markers, and using more serial orientation measures, such as first, second, then, etc. Men have also been found to be more likely to use distance indicators or metric distance terms, such as steps. Now, in terms of women and the use of Hedges, the women's language theory that was found by Lakoff in 1975 portrayed women's speech as softer and more polite, with linguistics features in that speech, including polite forms, hedges, expressions of uncertainty, empty adjectives, and lack of jokes. Now, according to Lakoff, hedges in particular reflected a degree of uncertainty in the speaker. Now, what we did differently to previous research is that previous studies collected either written or verbal directions. When collecting verbal directions, participants were either in different locations, or they walked the route prior to recollecting it, or the location was not specified. No study, to our knowledge, has recruited participants and conducted the direction-giving study at the destination point. Such a study is highly advantageous, as the environment around the destination point is fresh in the participants' minds as they were going about their daily routine. But as they were going about the daily routine, they were unlikely to have paid special attention to their surroundings in a way that might affect the direction-giving during data collection. This study aimed to investigate the extent to which gender influences direction giving when collected at the destination point. Now, as you can see on the map here, the starting point was Dino Library at the bottom of the map, and the destination point was the main library at the top of the map. The starting point was at the bottom of the hill, and the destination point was at the top of the hill, providing many turns and landmarks for our participants to mention. Said participants were 5 females and 5 males, and all participants were native speakers of British English and were students at Bangor University to ensure the thorough knowledge of the route, as all students were the library, or libraries are to some degree. The participants recruited were either in the 2nd or 3rd year of study, studying an array of subjects, including nursing, medical studies, and music. First-year students were not considered for the study to exclude knowledge gaps. In terms of our method, participants were approached by a female researcher in the main library. Participation was on a voluntary basis and no compensation was provided. And we provided random sampling, approaching participants when they were alone. The participants were asked if they could take part in a short study that would take no longer than 5 minutes. And after giving their informed consent to also being audio recorded, the researcher noted the gender, age, and ethnicity of the participants, as well as the age, the duration of the time in Bangor University, and the course they were undertaking. The participants were then asked to provide a route direction. The exact instruction is on screen. Whilst the participants were thinking and speaking out loud, they were recorded, and the data was then transcribed and annotated manually. Now, in terms of our findings, women used quite a few more spatial terms than men, as you can see in figure 1, with higher usage of the words left, in front of, and right. However, men exceeded women in the usage of behind, as only one man used the spatial concept, which result could be related to the previous finding that men refer to hidden targets more than women. Now, in terms of landmarks, there were 101 mentions of landmarks in total. The indoor landmark mentions were 24, and the outdoor landmark mentions were 77, with topographical landmark mentions being 13 by men and 20 by women, and building landmark mentions were 18 by men and 26 by women, which confirm previous research, as women utilized a higher number of landmarks in a direction, especially buildings, as seen in figure 2. Moving on in our findings, 15 modal verbs were used by men, and 12 modal verbs were found in the speech of women. However, notably, men used can, the modal verb expressing option and possibility, twice as much as women, which, after further investigation, was found to be an individual difference rather than a gender pattern. In terms of these fluency features, although it can be natural for a speaker to produce these fluencies due to the various cognitive processes and language processing involved, it can also show uncertainty. With that in mind, women used more hesitations than men, and also more pauses than men, but fewer restarts. In particular, women used filler words twice, almost more than twice than male participants. In particular, the filler word like, which was used 17 times by women and 7 times by men. In terms of hedges, as seen in figure 3, women used hedges a lot more than men, especially vagueness markers, which is a type of hedge that is used to indicate a lack of expertise from the speaker, such as seen in Tenbrink 2011, signaling uncertainty. Men used 6 hedges in total, whilst women used 19, and the most frequent subjectification hedge was the verb I think, bearing in mind that subjectification hedges are the use of verbs that express subjective thinking, such as I guess. The only depersonalization hedge was the noun thing, with depersonalization being the avoidance of the use of direct reference, and the most popular indetermination marker was the phrase I don't know, which is pretty self-explanatory. Moving on. Concerning serial orientation markers, men used first and second more than women, with them using it more than twice than women, but women used then more than men, which goes against previous studies. Interestingly, there was an equal number of after, with both instances being resorts of restarts. There were no cardinal directions found in our results, and regarding distance indicators, there were only 2 instances produced by male participants, 2 different male participants, but none by women. One of them was measured in kilometers and the other one steps. An unexpected result came into light in our research, which was the use of humor by female participants when giving directions, resulting in laughter in 4 out of 5 of our female participants. That was done for a variety of reasons, such as half-serious meta-communication, such as seen in the example here, or commenting on the route described, such as seen in the other example here, amongst others. Male participants in the study did not have that approach when direction giving, with no instances of laughter or attempts at humor. Staying in the topic of humor, those findings directly contradict the claims of Lakoff, as she stated that women's speech is characterized by a lack of jokes. It may, however, be an indicator of uncertainty, as it could be interpreted as nervous laughter, as seen in the example here, which would support Lakoff. On the other hand, however, our observation might support Tannen, who stated that men use language to gain social status, whereas women use language to achieve closeness with others. And this may have been more relevant to female speakers in our study, as do not forget the study was conducted by a female researcher. However, some other interpersonal functions of humor include status control and social maintenance. This opens up some interesting consideration considering social status and gender. Is humor used by female speakers as a covert way to attain social status? Is that done so only with members of their own gender or both sexes? In our scenario, the use of humor may have related either to uncertainty or to achieve closeness with a listener, or both, in a convenient conflation of purposes. Now, women used more than 3 times the number of hedges than men, especially vagueness markers, which is consistent with the findings of lack of. Forget not, hedges portray imprecision and uncommitment, whereas vagueness markers indicate a lack of knowledge or expertise on the speaker's side. Now, all female participants were at least in the second year of university. Their directions, therefore, would have been based on a well-developed mental map of the local area. Since the ages of both gender groups were matched, this portrayal of uncertainty appears to be gender-based rather than context or age-based. Now, although fillers and hesitations are a natural part of spontaneous speech, women used more pauses, a considerably higher number of fillers than men. Women also used more pauses, more than twice the number of pauses, that is. Although that can be considered to be an uncertainty marker, these differences could also indicate a difference in mental representation timing when mentally planning a route. Lastly, in terms of projective terms, women were found to use more projective terms than men in their verbal output whilst giving directions, which is consistent with previous findings in previous research. When considering right and left markers, previous research proposed that the indicators of an intrinsic frame of reference on route perspective, which could relate to differences in spatial skills found between men and women, thus alluding to a difference in cognitive processes. Now, when investigating language use, a plethora of variables are likely to act jointly alongside speaker gender due to the complexity that defines human nature. In this study, all participants were in their early 20s. Future research in this area could add age differences as a likely factor, influencing linguistic choices along with gender. Similarly, participants of the same gender but of different academic disciplines portrayed linguistic differences in their direction giving, such as the example shown here, with the one female participant using no disfluence in speech, whilst the second female participant using 12. As they were the same age and the same gender, it's probably likely due to their academic discipline. Although, of course, this may have been an individual difference in this case, previous research has highlighted that professional background affects linguistic patterns. Thus, an interesting question is raised as to what extent our academic discipline shapes the way in which we speak. Thus, to conclude, results show that despite modern tendencies towards gendered fluidity, gender appears to have a considerable influence in direction giving in a controlled setting. In terms of the use of humor found in our study, future research examining the relationship between gender and jokes may reveal complex distinct motives for the use of humor in contexts where it may appear unexpectedly, such as here, in route directions. Of course, our small-scale qualitative study could only provide some indications of patterns of current gender preferences in relation to previous findings. It's hoped that future research would shed further light on the way spatial language operates in liaison with our gender and alongside other influencing factors. Thank you for listening to my presentation of our study. Do you have any questions?